All right. I love to see the diligent provision of feedback. Thank you guys for doing that, as always. Let's go ahead and keep doing that. If you have comments you want to get to Brayden, they would serve him. But we'll go ahead and begin, and let's start as we always do with evidences of grace, things we appreciated, things that were strengths either in the sermon itself or Brayden's preaching. Titus.
I thought you had some really great, like there were multiple lines, just like one sentences that seemed like you really spent a lot of time work. Like one of them you said that was really good was the presence of good fruit in your life is not so he'll save you, but evidence that he has saved you. You had another one, I didn't get to write it down. There's something on no neutrality. But I just thought there were several of them that were really memorable and really thought helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. I agree. There were a number of well-crafted kind of summary statements that helped provide punch. They were accessible, they were clear, and penetrating in a real way. And then they did, I think, stick with you. I identified that one. Identified a few others as well. So it just showed it shows both care and crafting, but and it also reveals. I mean, it takes thought for those kinds of things. You've got to think about how to, summarize a point in a clear, concise way. It's not easy to do. So, good observation. Great job.
Kind of connected to that, you had several questions. That is that question: what does the fruit in your life say about you? Like that kept coming up again and again. So I think those questions are helpful for what does it say? And that that wasn't just a one-off. That came up several times. That was helpful to keep asking myself that. Like it brought some cohesiveness to it. And it's a really good question. So.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. And what's I think that we can often do make use of questions in application. That's not the only way to apply, but I think with this particular text too, it was appropriate because the whole point of the text, as you brought out, or a very central point of the text is precisely that. Yeah, both of these parables are about self-examination. They're coming at the end of the sermon here in Luke chapter 6, and Jesus is sort of winding things down. The last parable really is the conclusion of kind of the whole sermon, as you saw when you studied it. And so those questions I think are particularly well aligned with the point of the text. If we're not evaluating ourselves by the text, then we're not letting the text function the way it's supposed to function. So, yeah, good. Kyle.
The phrase, the fence is mine, I would put that in the category of a haunting line.
Mm-hmm.
And most messages don't have a haunting line, something that comes back to, it's not just memorable, it's
good.
digging in and challenging and echoing, and that many sermons can have memorable and not haunting. Haunting, that was a haunting line.
Yeah, that's good. It was.
In every good way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is the fence is, I'd not ever heard that story, or I don't know if it's a common one, but it was a bam. Yeah, well said. Yes, Asher.
Yeah, I just thought your organization was really good. Like those 2 points, your word reveals who you are, God's word shapes us into who we are. I just knew, like, talking to you beforehand, that this is just kind of not an easy text to, like, bring. Like, I thought they were different, but there was a unity to a sermon. And I remember you were talking about it, I was like, yeah, I got no help for you. Like, you were thinking through it, and, like, even the way you picked up on 47, like, that second one's about hearing Jesus' words. It's not just, well, if you trust in God, you're sure. It's about his words, and, like, to draw the parallels between that. I just thought it was really helpful to give it not just 2 separate sermons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Yeah, it had on these questions that we prompt you with, do the main points reflect the text structure? Absolutely. You drew one from each of the parables in a very appropriate way. We'll talk about a few little things in terms of structure in a moment, but it supported, kind of your prop statements that you had at the beginning. So it held together. There was unity with it. So yeah, I think it was easy to follow. And thus, good structure. Good. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a challenging text in certain ways, because you do have I'm sure you wrestle with this. You've got a parable that's kind of part of the sermon, and then you've got kind of an ending parable that's the conclusion to the whole sermon. And so tying those together is, or properly aligning those and letting each play their particular role in the way in which they do in the sermon is not easy to do. And I thought you did a good job of it. Nike.
An application, I believe, was in the second point of just like, what is your foundation on? I thought it was really good. One, because it got specific in that you were listing depression or like the trials and troubles that you were listing. But two, was encouraging and hopeful, because one, I just like the phrase faithful saints, and just like actually like we've been faithful. But two, it's he will hold you fast. And there was just like a surety in how you said that, and encouragement in how you said that. And I think anyone that's going through trials should be left with hope after being that. And I thought that was very good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a nice moment. That was a nice moment in the sermon. You just paused, and in a very personal way. It's like you were feeling it, in a very personal way. You just empathized with people. You cared for them. You pointed them to Christ. So that was a nice moment. There's no way you wouldn't be encouraged with that. And I think Mikey's point's a good one. You had some good categories there, and no doubt addressing people that would be in your audience. So, yeah, good. Yes, Austin.
I thought you were really expressive and like your
Mm-hmm.
strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Introduction, the very start story, like drew us in. Okay, it drew my attention. Okay, where are we going from this?
Yeah. Yes, I didn't have on the notes that I had, that introduction was not there. And so it just kind of had the context. And so when you started, I was like, oh, okay, there is an introduction. I had jotted down like real quick, your intro was the context. And it was like, oh no, I scratched it out. Story about the lady, because I was just kind of taking notes as I went. But yeah, that's bizarro world. That's just amazing. But and I want to, on that introduction, I want to say this too. You did something really nice in the introduction. Sometimes guys get introductory vehicles, whether it be a story or a quote, whatever it is, and it takes some thought to land that introductory vehicle and guide it into what you're going to do. And you did that really well. You had this line. Where did I jot it down? Yeah. The customer bashed you on the head with a keyboard, blah, blah, blah. And then you had this great line that it's a topic that splits the room. Just bam. I thought, and I just wrote, very nice. That's just great. What a great way to sum it up. The topic splits the room. And it is, and then you kind of gave a few other examples. And then you went, well, Jesus is kind of splitting the room. And I just thought that was very nicely done. And to Austin's point about your presentation, yes, strong voice, high energy, passionate, and so very much appreciate that. You put your heart into this. You were projecting, you were proclaiming, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the other side. But I really appreciated that. Your heart and soul was in this message, and you gave yourself to us, and I really appreciated that.
I really thought that your whole sermon encapsulated the dichotomy that's present, that splitting to illustrations. It just constantly was coming back to
Mm-hmm.
that splitting, that side or this side, application, that side, this side. It was like one giant metaphor, the sermon, of that pivotal choice of, are you Christ's or are you not?
Mm-hmm.
And what that then manifests.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I think that was consistent throughout. Excellent.
You want more, Jeff?
Yes.
I think it was Chapel that talks about it in addressing different crowds in those splitting the room, but the believers and non-believers. And I think that there was a good balance there. It wasn't just like directly focused on one or the other, but there was application for that.
Yeah. No, I thought you were to both Joel and Zach's point, and I put this down. You gave. I mean, how shall I say? I mean, this text is, this is Jesus addressing people, and it is somewhat, it is confrontational, not in an angry way, but in a serious way, and I thought you honored that in the application, like Joel was saying. You didn't, to take, like with Jesus is confronting someone, and if we don't feel somewhat confronted, then we're not hearing the claim of the text. And not if it's a church and the basic, our assumption is that most people in that room are followers of Christ, then you don't want confrontation to be condemning, because your church is a different crowd than the people gathered on the hillside that Jesus was addressing. Nonetheless, we do need to feel that. We need to feel the weight of it, and you did that throughout. So good observations. Excellent. Well, a number of good things you did well there, Brayden. Good, clear structure, passionately delivered, thoughtful illustration, and a. This is what I was starting to say a moment ago. You had your thumb on application throughout. This wasn't just a paper. It wasn't just an exegetical treatment. We felt the application pressed on us the entire time. You helped enable the text to function the way it was meant to function, which is to address us. And so we felt the claim. We felt the confrontation, as it were. So a good applicatory thrust. You were preaching to us. You weren't just talking to us. And I don't mean that as I mean you were letting God's word, you were addressing us with God's word, not just telling us about God's word. And we felt that throughout. It was well done. All right, ways we can help Brayden grow, either this message or his preaching in general.
Mine's one really, really small, quick thing, but it took me a little bit back, and I think it would make the haunting statement even more haunting. You said Satan said son. Now, son is associated with our relationship with God. I think there's a way that you could say a more derogatory kind of lack of care from Satan. I know you're not. I know it's just an expression. I get that, but I agree that it's a haunting statement. And just to cap it off with a word that is more, I don't know, haunting in that sense could really make that sink in, like buddy or
Slave.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's very minor.
No, but it's a good impulse, Joel. I sort of took it it sort of struck me. It's like, oh no, you're mine.
Yeah, that's what I got too. I think.
So which kind of made it haunting to me. It's like, oh man, I'm a son of the devil. But no, it's a good point. It's a good thing to consider. Good thing to consider. Along those lines, this is a very small thing, but because you mentioned it, near the end, right near the end, you were addressing non-believers. So for people whose lives aren't built on God's word, and I think the sense was that this is non-believers, and you said there's good news for you, brother and sister. So I think with that one, I wouldn't. If you're addressing non-believers, you're just saying it like, you bump into someone in the grocery store and say, hey, brother, you're probably saying it that way. But I think in that context, it can almost make them feel, you wouldn't want to address them with that Christian kind of language, if indeed there's a question whether they are or not. So a small thing, but I noted that as well. Did you have your hand up?
I could say I didn't have it up.
Oh, okay. Is your raising hand?
Yeah, I was gonna say one is, I think like the application was really good for like, there are two sides. I think that's super clear and that was really good. I think I would like add the kind of pastoral, like aside to, okay, I'm a struggling believer, like specifically to that person, because I think like it's easy for me to enter sermons like that. I'm a good Christian, I fail all the time. Like, what's my fruit say? And part of that is just sin in my own heart. But there will be people in the congregation like that who are going to struggle with congregation. So not to don't completely like take the edge off, like leave the challenge, because the challenge is good. But I think like having a specific pastoral word to people, because there'll probably be people in church like that. So just a thought I had in application.
No, very, very good. The other side of that confrontation, or not that you were like getting in our face, you didn't do that, but letting the text confront. The other side of that is, and I alluded to this a moment ago, the people that we're typically addressing are not like, they're not as quite the diverse gathering as Jesus was addressing. And I think you very much have to have an applicatory category for a text like this. Is what does this say to the Christian who's tempted to think they're on the other side? And I think a gospel presentation could really help that. You gave the gospel presentation to the non-believer. But something like this, a lot of us are here, and we really do know the Lord. We have been saved, but we know our lives don't measure up. We've said things you said things to your children this week, and if you read Jesus' word, you think, oh, where did that come from? Or you're aware of disobedience. You're aware of an area where you're really struggling to obey and you just failed again. The good news of the gospel is Christ came to pay for those failures. Christ came to help struggling saints. So I think something like that would be real important with a message like this. So, and that's Kyle, one of the things that we say is each sermon gives us opportunities for principles for all of us. And I think that's a really important one. And I'd love to hear what you think about that as a pastor. You always want to have in mind, now, you're not just taking, okay, what does this text say? And I'm just going to give it to my folks. You're also saying, who are the folks and how does this land on them? And so for the majority of your people, in most of our, I think our cases, we're addressing folks who genuinely know the Lord, sincerely follow Him, and they struggle, just like we all do. And so it even with a text like this, you're looking for ways to bring comfort to those kinds of folks. And you also, this is a really important principle with application. You always, or exposition too, you always have to, whenever you're preaching, expositing, applying, you always have to think, how can my people misunderstand this? And so you always have to have that category in your mind You don't have to use these words, but like what I'm not saying is this. Your words reveal who you are. Well, if you have sinful words, then you're not a believer. You don't want people to think that. So I think that's a great observation there, Leighton, and it's an important category for this particular text, I think, for people.
Yeah, a comment that I make often with that is that we're helping believers to identify where they don't believe as much as they think they do. Where for here, as you said, where they're not thinking maybe as clearly. Because we're preaching through things where they are in their mind saying, yes, I'm tracking, I agree. So we want to dig it where you think you're agreeing or seeing, but you don't quite as much as you think.
Yeah, good.
And that's where you gave the illustration, and you said this is an extreme example. And I think we can often look to those extreme example illustrations because we think, wow, that's really setting it apart. I think the person who's super good at this and helpful on the other side is Paul Tripp. His books, his examples are common, everyday, as ordinary as it can be. And that takes people a little bit more to where they are and helps to identify, oh, you mean that part of my life is a violation of this truth? And so I think that ends up most of the time being a little bit more effective, being as ordinary with examples versus extreme, so we can point out where you're not as in focus with this truth as you think.
Yeah, good, Kyle. Yeah, that's a very wise observation. What you could do, and what can often be helpful, is if you do use an extreme example. This guy says he's Jesus, It's kind of like, and I really appreciate you said that's an extreme case, but then follow that with, you followed that with what is the fruit in your life. Then follow that with, now, most of us aren't going to do that, but here's what we can do. And then follow it with something real ordinary. Or real, and people go, because that one's kind of funny, or bizarro, it's kind of like, okay. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not like that. Oh, but I am like that, with that next one. So that can be to follow that with something really applicable can be helpful. Good. Were you raising your hand?
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
So I just want to be careful how I say it, because your presentation and delivery, like I said to you earlier at lunch, what I was excited to see is that I saw Brayden preaching, and I really loved that. I didn't think you were trying to be someone else or present someone else. The side of it that was might need some work or it's a little hard is that when you get into a point, your cadence varies a ton, and just what words you're emphasizing and how you're emphasizing what in a sentence is just so it can get hard to follow at certain points, and it's hard to track what you're saying. I found it in this instance just because the cadence and the ebbs and the flows and the leading into it got really into it at certain points, and that just made it. There's a moment or two where I was just I couldn't track what he was saying. So I don't know. That might be a me problem listening. But that was just
Yeah, good.
Okay.
No, that's good. I think I know what you're talking about there, Mikey. I want to piggyback on that in a slightly different way. As we said, appreciate the passion, strong voice, good energy, excellent. And I say this every year. There's certain guys who, when they preach here, I'll say, you need to, and I'll use hyperbole, but you just need to scream. And when you do, when it feels like you're screaming, for the rest of us, it's going to go, oh, he's into it a little bit. In other words, because they would just never scream. You know what I mean? So, in other words, I need more of you. And then if they really stretch themselves, they're coming across just kind of lively, you know. But then there's other guys that I will say, we need less of you. We need to pare it back because it's all out there. You're more in the second category. So it was, again, the energy's great, but I think you do have to dial it back a little bit. And what I think, I don't know if we're saying the same thing, Michael, but there were a few things where you're, and I don't know, because and let me first say, Brayden, with your, I can't get in your head and see what you see, but with your challenges and reading and the way your mind does things with words, I never would have known. It was fantastic. On that, it was like, praise God. For Kyle, Brayden, I'm missing the word. Well, when letters mess up on you. Dyslexia, yeah.
Dyslexia is calculated dysgraphia.
Okay, there you go. As like he said, and so the fact that I never would have known that. Now I think there was some of your enunciation, not often, but there were a few times when you enunciated a word, and I wasn't sure if you were if your mind was grabbing hold of the word or not. But some of those, the enunciation of, I'm trying to think of an example, but it almost, you said it and you really enunciated the word almost in an emphatic way, and it sounded a little dramatic, Now, I don't know if you were just feeling it, or I don't know if you were getting your mind around it.
No, it's when I don't understand what I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
So like most of the time it's with things that I don't have memorized. Just like I have most of it memorized.
Okay.
I can't read fast enough.
Okay.
And I'll forget, and so then I'm trying to pick up.
Okay.
And then I'm trying to read, but my brain isn't comprehending what I'm reading, and so I'm just elongating the word.
Okay.
Time to catch back up to understand what I'm talking about.
That's what I meant by your mind getting hold of. That's exactly what I wondered. Not that I understand all the dynamics, but I really did wonder that. Is he just like getting his mind, doing what you just said? And that, that's great. I don't want you freaked out about how that comes across, but when there's a lot of passion with it, sometimes it can come across, it can sound a little dramatic, and there were a couple of moments where it almost felt almost manic, a little bit like, okay, slow down a little bit, and just so, because you got to remember we're addressing, there is a proclamatory aspect of what we're doing, and some people are more lively than others, and you're going to be in that category, which is great. I don't want you being someone you're not. It's the last, I don't want anyone being someone they're not. Sometimes guys need to be a little bit more who they are. And sometimes guys need to be a little bit less who they are, or at least who they are publicly, in terms of that presentation. So that's, again, I don't want you unduly preoccupied with that, but just recognize that can sometimes come across. I think, like when you're really into something, I think you can sometimes. I think the introduction was like this with the lady bashing, and I would also say, parenthesis, most, and I've observed this already. I observed this with Eric. I observed this with Leighton. In this setting, this artificial setting, first time, it's freighted. The second half of the sermon is usually different than the first half. Mm-hmm. Guys are getting their sea legs. You're getting more comfortable. By the second half of the sermon, you're kind of feeling. I think that was partly what was happening to you. But that introduction, it was just a bit over the top in terms of you were just, it was a funny story. It's a dramatic story, but you were just, your presentation there, the energy, the volume was a little high. So I would say, dial that back. But, again, I want to say that's first part of the sermon, and it was much less like that as you went.
No, that's very controllable, though, because think it's more like was so used to doing that because of preaching to college kids for
Mm-hmm.
the last 3 years that
Okay.
like, where you have to like if you don't go out and grab their attention,
Yeah,
give it to
yeah.
you. And so I think I'm just so used to being like, you better have an intro that smacks me in the face.
Yeah,
And
that's
so-
good.
so
Do you know
think
what I
that's
thought?
Very helpful for me to be like, no, you don't need to have an intro. That's fine.
Yeah, well, the intro's great. Slaps you in the face. Nice pun. Quite literally. But you know what I thought when I was sitting there? I was saying, I had that exact thought. I thought this to a bunch of students would be different than this in a church. And that's great that you said that, because I had that exact thought when you were doing it. Yeah, so I think that just on that presentational side, those comments will be helpful to you. Yes, Asher.
Yeah, brief thought, I just thought some of the metaphors, because you have two illustrations, two metaphors Jesus is using, and I think it could have been helpful if you were a little clearer on those, so just stick to the tree, the fruit in that first point, and then maybe you reference it once or twice, but I think in the second point in particular, you really use that foundation language, like that's the language he's using, the rock, kind of talk about being bolted in or whatever. You mentioned the fruit again. I was like, is he referencing earlier stuff, or is he tying the fruit into this? And then even like, it's a really powerful expression, but like, God's going to hold you fast. That's a great, I'm not saying that was bad at all, but I wonder if you could frame that more in terms of the foundation metaphor. And so, God's got you, firmly on that rock or whatever, like something like that, just to give us clarity, because it can be easy to think, okay, because it seems even in Luke here, it's like I've got the tree and then I've got the building. Just kind of sticking those there, I think might be helpful.
Yeah, good points. Because you did use in the second point fruit, and it did mix the metaphors a little bit. All right, let's talk about this. I'm going to talk about a few things here. First of all, you've got an organizational, the way you came out of your intro, setting some context. I'm going to say a few things about let's talk about your prop a little bit, and then your main points and how they relate, okay? Now, you've got your organization sentence here. What's labeled an organization sentence, and this is what 90% of PC guys in this setting do. They don't get the organizational sentence, although you guys did so far. But what you wrote here by organizational sentence was a fine thing to say. It just wasn't the organizational sentence. And we'll talk about what your organizational sentence can be. Not a big deal. But you got to this point, and you said a person, and this is well said, our text, here's how you know you're living the life that I'm calling you to live. And then you said this, a person's true character is shown by their actions, building either a strong or fragile foundation in life, which you had labeled as your organizational sentence. Then you went right into what you have labeled as a prop. Evidence of true belief is seen in the foundation of your life and the fruit that you bear. Okay? So I'm going to say a few things. One, in terms of the presentation of your prop, let it function. In other words, you covered that. It was the way it was presented. It just flowed out of it flowed out of very naturally what you had just covered, and it flowed into the text, and it didn't stand out. So if you're giving a prop, and most of our sermons will, you want to let it stand out and land on people. So that's just the presentation of the prop. So something like, and just to remind you of stuff we've talked about, like in homiletics, is kind of setting it up with a formula. So here's what we're going to learn from this text. Here's what the Lord would have us know. Little pause, and then give the prop. If it is the main idea, then you want people to know that. Okay? So that's a tiny thing. But it helps our prop actually function. And I thought this was well worded. I think this is a fine prop, although I'm gonna play with it with you. Evidence of true belief is seen in the foundation of your life and the fruit that you bear. That's very nice. this is not a, but again, this is for all of us. Usually, this is not always the case, but usually, listen to that prop. It's foundation of your life and fruit that you bear. Okay? So one is from the first, or one is from one point, one is from another. Usually, if your two main points are contained in your prop, and people do that all the time. I hear people do that all the time. So, evidence of true belief seen in the foundation of your life and the fruit you bear. Point one, the foundation of your life. Point two, the fruit that you bear. When that happens, for me, it's not my preference. Typically, because what I think is you haven't crystallized the point quite enough. So I would not prefer typically props that contain the two main points. Now, your two main points were a little bit different. And again, now I want to get to exegesis here because this is tough. You've got this lengthy sermon with these little sections in it. And then you've got the conclusion kind of to the whole sermon, right? And you can see, and you'll know this having studied it, but just for everyone else, why do you call me Lord and not do everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, right? This is the concluding thing. If you look back at 6, 17, and 18, he came down, and a great multitude came, and they came to hear him, verse 18. So this is Jesus now. He's coming back to the end. You come to hear me? Now, let me address all of you. Bottom line, if you come to hear me, and there's 3 verbs there. Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I'll show you what he's like. And what's interesting is, in the terms of the two groups, both groups come and hear. Look at the second guy, the one who hears and does not do. So they both hear. The issue is, are they coming to Jesus? And you got there are 3 present tense verbs there that speak of just kind of what following Jesus is like. All right? So I'm just going to think out loud with you on a difficult text, just pushing you to precision, pushing all of us to precision. And so now let's go to your mains, and we'll come back to your prop. Thought your mains were fine. Your words reveal who you are. And then the second one was, if we do them, God's words shape who we are.
I changed it when I said it.
I thought it was a little different when you said it.
I changed it to when put into action, God's word shape who you are.
Okay. I think that's very nice. I was just kind of playing with it while you were talking in such a way to support the prop. So what is, let's think together for a second. What is this? And again, it's a little hard because we've got kind of a portion and then we've got a concluding thing. We're trying to get a prop for both, or that contains both, even though this is leading towards this for sure. And what I think this text is, and your prop has this evidence of true belief. I like that. I'm going to be a little bit more precise because this is tied so close to Jesus. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me hears my words and does them, I'll show what he's like. The one who hears and does not do them is like this. So this is about discipleship. This is about what a real, authentic relationship, what an authentic relationship with Jesus really is about. Does that make sense? Do you guys see that? Do you agree? It's fine if you don't. Don't tell me later. So I played with that evidence of true belief and was saying an authentic relationship with Jesus will be seen, and this is not great. I'm jotting while you're talking. An authentic relationship with Jesus will be seen in a life of glad submission to his will. And what I did there, for better or worse, Brayden, is I needed a prop that was a little bit elevated so as to contain both of these. Okay? So I was thinking, okay, an authentic relationship with Jesus, because this is ultimately about who follows him. Right? What does it really mean? Who's a real follower of Jesus, and therefore who's his? And whose life is secure? And by the way, whose life is going to be secure at the end? Because the emphatic nature of the conclusion, when the stream broke, immediately it fell. He didn't stop and the house went down. No, he said, and the ruin of that house was great. So what's the shadow hanging over this? Final judgment. So this is more of an exercise. I'm not here. So if you have something like that, then the two mains I have, in our lives reveal who we really are. Now, I'm making an assumption there. Is the first parable only about our words? Or is it about the fruit of our life more broadly, with words illustrating it? You could use words, but I think it's a little bit more, I think the application is a little bit more broad. And so if I have a prop like that, and then I have a main, our lives reveal who we really are, and Jesus here speaks of our words, and our life is seen no more vividly than in what we say. And then the second one, and again, trying to get like so our lives reveal who we really are, which is just it's your main point. It's just broadening it, right? Who we are. But if this is about ultimately following Jesus, and you said true belief, and I'm just saying a true relationship with Jesus. And then what did I jot down here? I don't know if I like this or not, but I'll just write it. Our destiny is determined by who we follow. I probably want to play with that. But you see the point. Our lives reveal who we really are, but where we're going is going to be determined by who we follow. Are we really obeying Jesus? And I think both of those then help support a prop like an authentic relationship with Jesus will be seen in a life of glad submission to his will. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is getting at, right? It's not just mere obedience. It's coming to Jesus, hearing his words, and doing them. In other words, they really love him. They trust him. They embrace him. And they walk in his ways. Right? Does that make sense? So this is just a little exercise that your text gives us an opportunity to play with a little bit. I liked your prop. Evidence of true belief is seen in the foundation of your life and the fruit that you bear. I'm wanting to, and then I'm going to play with that prop that I gave you. I'm going to say one other thing. Now, so that's like a prop I would jot down, and then I would go, okay, that's good. An authentic relationship was seen in a life of glad submission to his will. You're preaching this to your people. Think of your home church. Does this text offer us hope? What's the hope? Built on the rock, right? What is built on? Okay, now we get into these metaphors. Because the other thing I would do, even if you kept this prop, are you with me? Okay. I didn't want to overwork your circuits here. You've got foundation of your life and fruit that you bear. Those are both metaphors. And I think typically at the prop level, you want to translate those. We've talked about this in here. Because foundation, I don't know what, we're Christians and you're PC students. You know what we're talking about. But foundation, it is a metaphor for something else, right? Which is foundation, it's a metaphor for what? Yeah. How about, security, stability, or lack thereof. And then fruit, well, fruit is so common. Fruit of your life, what you do. That almost needs no translation. So then I tweaked my prop from an authentic relationship with Jesus will be seen in a life of glad submission to his will. That, I think, is descriptive. Then I jotted down this. Security in life is only found in a life of glad submission to Jesus. Because then it's like, wow, that's how you find security in this life and forever. Submitting, loving, following Jesus. Now, we're gonna get that message in 2 points. The first one reveals who we really are. So step 1 is, who are you? Well, your life reveals who you really are. Step 2 gets to where we're going is determined by who we're following. Getting to that glad submission to Jesus. Hearing his words, doing them. So hearing and doing means we trust him. We believe him. We acknowledge his wisdom. We're denying ourselves and our own desires. And we're saying, no, I love you. I'm satisfied by you. I want to please you. You know, those kinds of ideas. Yes, Zach.
With your prop where it's at right now, would you personalize that rather than saying a life, moving it to your life? Or would you leave it still?
Yeah, you could for sure. Security in your life. Is that what you mean? Yeah. If it was me, because this is the way I just do things, I would say security in life, and then I'd apply it. But I think that's a fine thing to do, and your textbook would probably say do that.
Because that claim, we try to make it universal.
Yeah.
And not specific. Is that why?
Yeah, a little bit. It just seems a bit more principial to me than just kind of an instruction for you. Security in your life. On that final thing. In terms of how you unpack that, I would consider, and you have time. You would have some time in the message because you did great on time. 23 minutes.
Well, that was my question about that. Do we ask you after?
What's that?
Do we ask you the question after? You say what you're gonna say?
Go ahead.
So, generally, because of how much I struggle to read off paper,
Mm-hmm.
I plan for 10 minutes under the time, knowing that I'm going to preach off of my rubric
Mm-hmm.
for at least that amount of time. And
Mhm.
normally I still have to have my timer and cut myself down.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the setting and just I haven't preached in a long time, I was really focused on, I was really stuck
Mhm.
to my rubric.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, I'm not sure how much of a different sermon it would have been, I think normally, but what do you think I should do there? Do you
Yeah.
just keep allowing that to happen? Should I just try to stick really close to the rubric to try to memorize all my sermons? I know it's hard to see because you haven't heard me go
Yeah,
on
and
a little
it's
bit, but-
it's a little difficult, but a couple of thoughts I would have. One is it didn't feel like you were stuck to a manuscript of reading at all. You had good freedom from your notes, and in some good places, like when you're telling a story. You know, and we've talked about this here, right? When you're telling a story, you don't want to be going, and Kevin got up and said, or I was in the store and the lady hit me in the head. No, you don't want to be reading the story about something that happened to you, right? You want to gain some freedom there. Not that you can't have some kind of bullets down there to keep you on track so that your story doesn't go 20 minutes. So I didn't think you were too tied to it. It didn't feel that way. Therefore, it seems to me it would be wise to, I think you could have, I think your bigger risk is not being too tied to your rubric. I think your bigger risk is going off and maybe getting that higher energy going and getting revved up maybe too much. That's my sense. Yeah. Yeah. A couple of what this is expositional / exegetical. Okay, I'm going to say about 3 more things and we'll be done. First of all, one is an application. Under your first point, about the fruit and what your life says, you were addressing people. We try to spend too much time not sinning instead of spending time with Jesus, right? I think that's a good application, but the main application is your life doesn't reflect who you are, right? So Jesus is not trying to comfort people who are just really concerned about holiness. He's trying to confront people who aren't concerned about holiness at all. He's not trying to comfort people who are just really trying hard, but they're legalistic. He's more confronting people whose lives are not lining up with what they say. Now, in this particular setting, there would be, because a big part of the whole ethical message of this part is love. And so he is going to be addressing people who, well, no, I'm loving, but you're really not. But that's just a small thing. I'm not saying remove the other application, but I'm just saying that the primary application is you claim certain things, but your life contradicts it. And all of us, but Christians, all of us have this in our lives to some degree. None of us live up to what? But Jesus' words are searching, don't they? They are searching for us, aren't they? And they press us to him. Anyway. One other thing I want to get to. It was this. This was in your application under the second point, but you said this about the warning one, okay? You said this: your financial security will fail you. Any efforts of physical safety will be in vain. And I just thought, will they? All the time? Not all the time. Psalm 73. The wicked prosper sometimes. So you want to, I get your point. I know what you're saying. But it almost came across like, if you're not following Christ, your life's going to come crashing down. Now, if you put that in the eschatological framework, it will crash down. And I think that's what Jesus here has. Now, you could say your financial security will, your accumulation of finances will not provide you security. Oh, you may have a big bank account, but it's not going to be enough. And one day, it's gone. Your efforts at physical safety, or that may well fail today or tomorrow. You don't know. You can't find security there. So it's just a small tweak. It's not necessarily saying that the wicked is going to get it all in this life, meaning find retribution in this life. Sometimes they won't. So I think you have to tweak that a little bit. The other thing I would say on that point is I would bring in the horizon of final judgment. I think this applies to our temporal lives. Because we're talking about security here. We're talking about peace. None of those things are going to provide it. What will provide it is building your life, is following Christ, obeying Him, loving Him, spending time with Him aspect or thing that you brought out. Yes, all of that will. But I think I would, the ultimate specter hanging over this text is the final judgment. And that Matthew's version of this in Matthew 7 really pulls that out, right? Why do you say to me, Lord, Lord, I never knew you? So I think that gives you permission to go there with that. Okay? Excellent. Buddy, I think we all would say, your whole embrace of this year, given the things you have to do that others of us don't, figure out how to get your reading done, using your technology to kind of, it's amazing to me, and I so respect you. And the fact that you had a message, that you preached this message, and it was clear, and it hung together, and it was text-driven. I really appreciated your labors there, and the clarity that you attained in that, as well as the heart that you put into it. It was just a lot to be encouraged about. Very grateful. So let's thank Brayden again. Thank you, buddy.